pass the torch over to our MC, Alicia. Alicia, take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everybody on behalf of the National Career Development Association. Welcome to the NCDA webinar series. We are pleased that you have all joined us this evening or afternoon, depending on where you're at. Before we get started, I want to share a quick bit of technical information for you. During the webinar, please keep your microphone muted and your cameras turned off. We encourage any questions to be typed into the chat section, which I'm pretty sure you have all found that already. It's on the lower section of your screen. Jeremy will address those questions at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording link will be available on the NCDA website next week. Individuals who have signed up for this webinar can log into their account on the NCDA website to view their CE transcripts beginning next week. Groups that are attending will need to return their sign-in sheets to me in order to receive their certificates. This program is approved for 1 contact hour of continuing education. And if you have any questions about continuing education, you can contact myself, Alicia Cheek, at NCDA headquarters. I'll now turn it back over to Jeremy Schifeling.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And thanks to NCDA for hosting today and for you all for joining. I know for some of you, it's dinner time, so I hope I'm not taking you away from anything too tasty, but I promise the next hour will be super worth your while. And I just want to start with a little love where love is due to Alicia, to the NCDA team. As you know, these folks are working super hard behind the scenes to bring you great programming. So please send them a little bit of love in the chat. This could be a word of praise, your favorite emoji, however you want to kick things off. Just let Alicia and the team know that you appreciate their efforts. Thanks so much for that beautiful heart there, Kathleen. Alicia is definitely doing awesome stuff to support you every single day. I love that, Dina. Okay, so who are you speaking with today? So I got to tell you, I've got a really funny background myself, which kind of speaks to the power of career development. I got my start as a kindergarten teacher in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and then over the course of my career, was able to move into the tech sector and ultimately bring it all full circle because I currently lead the marketing team at Khan Academy. And the one place that really transformed my career, even more than school itself, was getting a chance to work at LinkedIn. So if you've ever used the LinkedIn alumni tool or LinkedIn university pages, that was the stuff that my team at LinkedIn built. And one of the things that I really noticed at LinkedIn is there was this big divide in terms of what we knew about LinkedIn on the inside and what students and alumni knew on the outside. And so my remit, my focus was how can I tear down that barrier, open up LinkedIn to make it more accessible to everyone. And I don't know how good a job I did when I was at LinkedIn, but I've been on a mission ever since to share those same insider secrets with students around the world, help them land the jobs of their dreams. And so what we're going to be covering today is not just LinkedIn 101, the stuff I share with students, but the really advanced and exciting new stuff that LinkedIn's been working on across every stage of the career development process, from finding your right path to getting into the interview room to crushing that interview. And so I just have to warn you before we dive in, as a former teacher, this will not be a standard webinar where I just go through a bunch of bullet points and you kind of turn your brain off and focus on your dinner. Instead, I'm going to ask for 3 things in return. Number 1, former teacher here, old habits die hard. Yes, there will be pop quizzes. No, they will not be graded. Number 2, probably even more importantly, is pull up another window and have it pointed to linkedin.com. And that way, the very best way to learn is not just to listen and think, but to act and do. So if you see me do something on my side, do it on your side in real time, bake it into your muscle memory. And then third and finally, I would love for you to take this beyond the realm of PowerPoint right into LinkedIn itself. So we're going to be doing a lot of role plays. Feel free to raise your hand right on Zoom or chat in. And if you are brave enough to volunteer for those role plays or to ask your own questions, I've got a little sweetener for you, which is a free copy of my brand new LinkedIn book. It's the #1 career bestseller on Amazon right now, and it's yours for free just for volunteering tonight. So with that said, let's start with the first pop quiz. And this one's a little bit autobiographical. So here I was teaching kindergarten back in New York about 20 years ago. And at the same time that I was teaching in Brooklyn, I was also taking the subway up to the Bronx to work with a young man named Ivan, who was my mentee. Now, Ivan was this great kid. He was captain of the baseball team, president of the student council. In other words, he was going places. I just wanted to know where he was going. So one day I asked him, Ivan, you've got your entire life in front of you. What do you want to focus on? And he said, Jeremy, don't worry about it. I've got it all figured out. I'm going to be a criminal forensic scientist. I was like, wow, here's the 17-year-old kid who knows more about his career than I do at 27. Where do you think Ivan got that confidence from? Was it A, his deep love of science, B, the fact that he had researched the role so thoroughly, or C, that he had seen it on TV? So Dina says C, Jessica says C, Donna says C, Stephanie says C, Lynn says C. At the risk of dating myself, I must confess you're all correct, because this was the heyday of CSI. Regular CSI, CSI New York, CSI Miami, all the CSIs. And that's what Ivan knew. Here he was growing up in the South Bronx. He didn't know a lot of product managers or bankers or consultants. He just knew what he saw on his TV. And you might think to yourself, well, it's Ivan's challenge. But here's what I've noticed, even coaching high-powered MBAs over the last decade, is we all have our own blind spots. We all don't know what we don't know. And to help you find out what's way out there for your clients and your students, I want to introduce you to a brand new LinkedIn tool called Career Explorer. And to bring it to life, I would love one brave volunteer to raise their hand right now in the Zoom or just chat in. Hey, I'm in Jeremy. And whomever is first will get the first copy of my book just for being so brave and putting yourself out there. So Dina, you were first tonight. Feel free to turn on your mic, turn on your webcam. I can't wait to meet you. And everyone, please send Dina a lot of love in the chat for being so brave. Welcome, Dina.
Hi.
Hi, how are you, Dina?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. And Dina, remind me of your background. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, or E-Town, as they call it. My
Oh.
spouse is stationed here at Fort Knox,
Wow.
and I work for the Microsoft Software and Systems Academy. I do all of their career development curriculum.
Wow.
I'm actually familiar with Career Explorer because we just started using it with my cohort.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to love this because
Yes.
this brings both LinkedIn and Microsoft together. And for those who don't know, Microsoft actually now owns LinkedIn as of 2017. So definitely a lot of tangled webs there.
Yes.
So first of all, let's check this out together. Career Explorer is so brand new that it's not even on LinkedIn.com yet. Instead, as you can see, it's on GitHub, which is a separate Microsoft tool all for developing new software. Yet, that being said, it's definitely powerful, it's definitely live, and it's definitely free. So I encourage you to check it out in the chat. And to demonstrate this, Dina, tell me about a typical person you might be coaching. What are they coming in with skill-wise? What kinds of jobs are they interested in?
So the group that I'm currently working with is doing a cybersecurity course. So they are coming in out of the military, transitioning into cybersecurity. So we use this to look at the skills that make up cybersecurity so they can see what translates.
Yeah, I love that. And I
So
think that's the real power of this tool, as you already know, is it's all about translation, right? What did I do in the past and how can that translate into what I can do in the future? And so what are the typical roles they're going for? Is it like cybersecurity analyst?
they're doing, so DART team, analyst would be one. What's another big one? Oh, they can get the position with the government contractors. I'm trying to remember what the name of the
Oh,
position.
sure, yeah.
You were in
And
IT, so you're probably familiar as much as I am that IT names their
it's
program.
really crazy. It's
their
like
jobs,
alphabet soup.
crazy names.
Yeah. PM, PMM, oh, totally.
Exactly.
So let me just first show how this works, and then I'll apply it in the context of cybersecurity. So the best way to think about Career Explorer is that this is the sort of culmination of 20 years of LinkedIn collecting data about professionals, and there are almost 900 million professionals on LinkedIn today, and their data science team trying to figure out patterns across those professionals. So for example, let's say that you had a student who came to you or a client who came to you, they had been a waiter or a waitress in school, but they're like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Where can I go with these skills? And what LinkedIn is now able to do is to reverse engineer these careers and say, hey, that time management skill set that you've been building in your day job, that actually links up Venn diagram style with what you need to do the operations coordinator role. You might not even know that role exists, but now you can actually see that linkage for the first time. And so it's all about finding that hidden web of connections that ties one job to another. So when you're using this with your clients, you always start with the location. And Dina, if you had to sort of pick a certain location that folks love to move to or be in, what would you say?
Actually, Atlanta is one of our hotspots right now.
Beautiful, hot Atlanta. And I know we've got some Atlanta folks on the line, so they'll appreciate that shout out. And then you might say, hey, I want to get into cybersecurity. And sure enough, there's that cybersecurity specialist role. Now, the first thing that is really valuable is it will explain to the really entry-level students, here are the skills that they need to master to get ready for prime time. So ISEC, network security, vulnerability assessment, all the stuff that even I don't know what it is, but it's important that they discover that so they know what they're getting themselves into. So that's the first step. But now, do you ever have students who ask the really smart question, Dina, which is, what could I do next with this job? Like maybe this is my first job out of this program, but where could that take me over the course of my career? Does that ever come up? Yeah, so the really savvy ones, right? Trying to figure it out. So what you can do is you can sort by different levels of similarity. And at first, it always sorts by high similarity. In other words, show me all the other roles on LinkedIn where there's lots of skills overlap. And not surprisingly, cybersecurity specialist, security analyst, pretty similar roles, share the same skills. But I think that's kind of a waste of time because we already know that roles that basically sound identical probably are pretty similar. What if we could find some roles that were a little bit off the beaten path? So maybe they had some things in common, but they actually open your students' eyes to things they didn't even know existed. Kind of like Ivan discovering roles outside of CSI. And so I'll tell you, I have heard of this job so often, network security engineer, but I'm not even sure what it is. And so if you want to give your students advice, Dina, in terms of how could they explore what this role is all about, who would you recommend that they speak to?
Well, we tell them, or I tell them, to link up with people that are currently doing those jobs on LinkedIn and have informational interviews. But I also tell them to check out the Department of Labor and Now This to see what's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so natural for us as coaches, right? Yeah, talk to someone, do informational interview. But for so many of our students and our clients, it's kind of mind blowing. Wait, I can talk to someone who has that job? Yeah. And that's the beauty of LinkedIn, right? Maybe 30 years ago, if you're Ivan and you don't know any information security specialists, you're kind of stuck. But now, even today, Ivan has the ability to come right in here, click find connections on LinkedIn, and sure enough, there they are, all those network security folks. And of course, you can filter based on school. So you can show me everyone who went to Eastern Kentucky, or watch this. Dina, you could even filter by saying, hey, show me everybody who has this on their profile, but also who is coming from the Army. And so sure enough, you're going to discover tons of Army vets who have left the Army and are now at KPMG and are at startups and are all these cool companies. You can reach out military vet to military vet to pick these folks' brains and learn about what it's like on the inside. So that's the first step. Any questions there, Dina?
No.
Okay, so far, so good. So let's say that this hypothetical client that Dina's working with says, oh, this is really cool. Richard, Tino, Castor, they gave me a really good sense of what's possible. Now I want to go for it. I want to think about how I build that out. Well, it turns out that LinkedIn will not only tell you about the job, it'll tell you about the skills that you might be lacking. And so you might already have these skills based on the Microsoft program, but what about Palo Alto Networks? What about Cisco ASA, whatever that is? It turns out for every single skill here, you can come to LinkedIn Learning, and sure enough, there's an entire course about that. Now, being part of Microsoft, Dina, do you already have access to LinkedIn Learning?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, so you're lucky. You've got it good. But here is an amazing hack for everyone. And I'll mention this again in the later part. If you go to your local library, I can almost guarantee you that they will also have free access to LinkedIn Learning. Because LinkedIn has been so smart about going to libraries and saying, hey, we want to get these courses into as many hands as possible. If you log in with your library card, you now have free access. So like you said, Stephanie, that is amazing. And please, please, please let your clients know all about that. And then, of course, when the big day arrives and they've skilled up a little bit, they can find those jobs on LinkedIn too. So just to come full circle, I want to give a massive shout out to Dina. You gave us such a great example to work with, and you really got the session off to an awesome start. So thank you so much, Dina.
Thank you.
I also want to give a little reminder to Anne that even though this is not on LinkedIn itself, you can find it right here in the chat. So if you click that link and you bookmark it, you can start sharing with your clients, or better yet, sit down side by side with your client and go through this together. A really powerful way for them to see beyond the beaten path. Okay, let's see what questions you have. Because by the way, not only is Dina getting a copy of the book, but anyone who asks a question today is also getting a copy. So let's see. Linda says, will there be an option to search nationally? Great question. So I do think that LinkedIn is still in beta testing here. However, if you have any ideas where you're like, hey, they should try out this or try out that, let me know, because I know the folks inside LinkedIn who are working on this, and I'd be happy to share that feedback. And then Linda also asks, for that search that I did, is it kind of one of these Boolean deals where you have to, put and or in front of something? In this case, you actually don't have to write and. And is assumed by LinkedIn. So in this case, you're looking for people who have network security engineer and Army somewhere on their profile. Great question, Linda. Okay, schools can definitely get free access to this, definitely. Absolutely. Everything I just showed you is free. In fact, everything I'll be showing you today is 100% free. And then Melinda says, if you use free LinkedIn Learning through a library, can you still get the LinkedIn badge? Absolutely. No problem there. When will this go live on LinkedIn? Ooh, good question, Fran. I suspect that LinkedIn is nervous about this because there are so many permutations. If they want to have someone test out every possible career path, every skill recommendation, it would probably take them from now until eternity. And so LinkedIn, being careful and cautious, part of Microsoft, doesn't want to put stuff out there until it's really, really confident in it. But I would say, even if the data is still sort of being worked on, it's directional enough, it's clear enough to give your students a sense of what's possible. Great question. All right. And then Kathleen says, we have the Career Explorer assessment. Is this related to the LinkedIn platform? I don't think so, Kathleen. I know that Career Explorer is probably a term that a lot of different firms or vendors have used. I think Career Explorer may be speaking to something different. Yeah. And then Sandy says, will it be available on the app? I don't think so, Sandy, just because it's not even available on the LinkedIn desktop site yet. So I don't expect it to be on the app anytime soon. Jessica says, is this Explorer using the skills field to connect skills to job titles, or does it search the overall profile for skill keywords? I would guess, Jessica, based on how messy profiles are, that this is only using skills data. So just to be really clear, if I click on Richard's profile, he's got all these skill keywords up here from his time in the Army, but probably the only skills it's drawing on are the ones that he explicitly entered, just because that way LinkedIn has a clean taxonomy to draw from and have apples to apples comparisons. Great question. Okay, I think we've covered the questions there. For now, let's move on to my next question for you, which is, if you had to guess, what skill became the #1 in-demand skill in the tech field that wasn't even in the top 10 6 years ago? So if you were thinking about, I wonder what every recruiter is looking for when they want to hire IT folks today, and that skill wasn't even relevant more than half a decade ago, what would you guess? Is it A, Agile, so how teams develop software very quickly? B, AWS, Amazon Web Services, that cloud platform that software is built on? Or C, Azure, Microsoft's cloud platform, which competes with AWS? So I know this is a tricky question. And Chrissy's like, I don't even know what any of those are. Chrissy, I work in tech and I can barely explain them. So I totally get it. But Kathleen says A, Fran says A, Dina bravely says C, Melinda says A, Ann says C, Stephanie says A, Jessica says B, Vanessa says B, Lynn says C, Dana says A, Joni says B, Stephanie says B, Toy says A, Donna says B, and Elisa says A, and Trish says B. I think we're all over the place, which is totally understandable because I feel the same way about this. But it turns out the answer is B. Look at the shocking data. These were the top skills on IT job descriptions back in 2015. And again, the vast majority of job descriptions are ingested by LinkedIn so they can see. And then just 6 simple years later, AWS has now risen to the top, even though it wasn't on the radar screen 6 years ago. And the reason I call this out is not to say that as career coaches, we have to know this stuff cold, but we have to be aware of how things are changing because it's changing so fast. And so, how do you stay on top of these trends? Well, I have another thing that I want to call out for you, another brand new report on LinkedIn called The Future of Skills. And if you want to be my brave volunteer this time and get the next copy of the book, all you've got to do is raise your hand on Zoom or chat in the chat. And just like Dina, we'll have a little conversation and we'll get you that copy of the book and help everybody learn at the same time. So it looks like this time it's going to be Kathleen. So Kathleen, thank you for volunteering. Can't wait to see you and chat with you. And everyone, please shower Kathleen with love in the chat for getting us on to our next session here. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Kathleen, remind me about yourself. Where are you coming from? Who are you representing?
So I am representing myself. I'm a
Oh.
member of NCDA. I'm a coach. I have some private practice and I work at Princeton University as a career advisor.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So you contain multitudes, to quote a famous poet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so Kathleen, tell me about a typical industry that your students or your private clients come to you really curious about.
Investment banking.
Oh, absolutely. Here you are, so close to New York. Princeton obviously has graduated tons of Wall Streeters. Everyone wants to get
Yes.
into IB. So
Yes.
again, brand new report, also on GitHub, because it's not on LinkedIn proper yet, but also live, also free, and available right in the chat. Feel free to bookmark that. And so again, just like I mentioned, what LinkedIn is doing is it's taking the data that they had in their own database 6 years ago, and they're running the comparison to say, hey, have the top skills in job descriptions changed meaningfully in the last 6 years? And you can look at this across this high level, or more importantly, you can dig into a specific area. So in this case, what do you say we focus on United States and investment banking roles? How does that sound, Kathleen?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, so here we go. And
So
let's say maybe,
investment analyst.
yeah, I was gonna say that's kind of like that role that your typical undergrad might go into right out of school.
Excellent.
And look at this. You might think that the world of investments would probably stay a little more, classical than the world of tech. But even this industry has changed 21% over the last 6 years. What you can see here is that financial modeling has become more important, investment management has made it to the top, and financial analysis has also risen up. Whereas you have some things that are actually trending down, like portfolio management. And so first question for you then is, let's imagine that you were sitting side by side with a senior at Princeton or a private client of yours. They really want to break into the IB space. How might you advise them to leverage these insights?
So I often recommend exactly this, which is to make sure that they have financial modeling and have a strong ability to use Excel. So financial analysis and financial modeling, and then of course, an understanding of investments, although that looks like it went down, but investment strategies, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think
So
you're
that's
absolutely right. Like that's an amazing place to
cool.
start. If
Yeah,
they tell
that's
you, hey, Kathleen, that sounds great, but I don't have any room in my curriculum or my syllabus for a new course. What
right.
can you mention to them?
LinkedIn Learning.
LinkedIn Learning, because you can just click right
Yay.
there on financial modeling. Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, the 3-hour
I didn't know
course, and you're off
yeah.
to the races.
Awesome.
And I'll mention, by the way, I did a book talk early this year for Princeton Public Library, which is amazing,
Oh,
by the way.
yeah.
They have free access to LinkedIn Learning. So I'm sure Princeton
Yeah.
University does too, but
Yeah, we
definitely
have
the
it for
library.
everybody. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do have it, but it's great to know about libraries. I had no idea.
Yeah. So
And does
bottom
that
line,
say
yeah.
GitHub IO future? Like,
Yeah.
is there
So
a dash?
yeah. So I put the link right in the chat. So probably the
Oh, you
easiest way
did.
to get it is if
Perfect.
you click right there.
All
And
right,
I'll
perfect.
also send out my slide deck along with the recording, which also
Okay.
has all the links embedded in it. So you can always get it
Excellent.
that way as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for being such a rock star volunteer, Kathleen. You were awesome.
Oh, thank you.
And so I know it's a simple one, but again, your students have limited time to invest in their resumes, their LinkedIn profiles. Might as well focus on the things that matter most, not the things that were important 6 years ago. And this at least gives them a crystal ball of where things are headed. Any questions about future of skills or anything else we've covered so far? Okay, Linda says, will Career Explorer link the skills on the left for a given job to LinkedIn Learning? Yes. So every single time you see a skill in any of these reports. So for example, I'm actually curious about this. I wonder if LinkedIn has anything for organic farming. I'm not sure. But I'm going to click on organic farming. Hey, and sure enough, LinkedIn Learning has something about farms. Maybe not the exact perfect video, but there's always some kind of connection, Linda, right back to LinkedIn's Learning Archive. Great question. Okay, and same for Career Explorer as well. Absolutely. So if we go back to that one, every time we click on Cisco or Checkpoint or any of these things, you will definitely find lots of great courses linked directly. Okay, time for our next question, which is, and I know I kind of ruined this one, so I apologize. How much does it cost to learn data analysis on LinkedIn? Is it on the house, $29 a month, or $199? What's your guess? Joni says A, Melinda says A, Vanessa says A, everyone says A because I let the cat out of the bag a little too early. But the truth is, there's even a whole nother thing I haven't told you about. So just so you know, LinkedIn will often say, hey, if you want this course, you have to pay $199. Or if you want to buy it on a subscription basis, it's $29 a month. But the reality is, by going to this LinkedIn learning offer that Microsoft and LinkedIn have jointly offered, you can offer your students and your clients free LinkedIn learning courses in all of these in-demand areas. So project management, business analysis, software development, data, systems administrator, all this stuff is completely free through 2025. So if you're worried about LinkedIn Learning not being available through your university, or maybe your library doesn't have access, you can still give your students free access for the next 3 years through that link I shared in the chat. So be sure to check that out. Okay, on to our next hack. So if you are a recruiter and you are using LinkedIn, as you know recruiters do all the time, to search for top candidates, how do you know if a given candidate really has that desired skill or not? Is it A, all the endorsements on their profile, B, the assessment they took on LinkedIn, or C, the recommendation speaking to their skills? So Jessica says C, Fran says B, Anne says C, Chrissy says C, Stephanie says C, Stanley says C, Dina says B typically, but C also. And I would argue that probably A and C have a certain amount of validity to them, but the newest thing on LinkedIn in the past year or two is the ability to take skill quizzes. And the reason this matters so much is that if you were to look at LinkedIn Recruiter, the $10,000 per year per seat tool that all the recruiters use out there, they can now filter not just for skill, but for who has actually crushed those assessments and gotten a high score in the top 30%. And so what you should absolutely consider for your students is when they come to their profile, if they're focused on a highly technical role, so data, programming, business analytics, come down to the skills section and have them consider demonstrating skills. Because what they can do is they can take assessments in each one of those areas. So Python, SQL, R, Tableau, Power BI, all the things that are critical in their world, they can actually showcase those skills and be found by recruiters who specifically filter for that. That being said, here's a big note of caution. I know a lot of you are working with students who are not interested in super technical roles. Maybe they want to be in sales or marketing or brand management. If that's the case, do not let them freak out, because I know students tend to freak out a little bit when anything new happens on LinkedIn. This is primarily for technical hard skills. Now, LinkedIn would love to be able to assess for soft skills. And in fact, they're trying to enable that for the first time by saying, hey, come in here and write a little message about why you're so good at marketing or record a video. But the honest truth is, there is no assessment in the world today that can really test those soft skills the way that an interview can. We're getting to meet someone face to face. And so for the folks focused on more interpersonal roles, this is less important. But for the folks focused on technical roles, please let them know this exists. Okay, Dina says, knew about the assessments, but not the recruiter aspect. Yeah, and that's so critical, Dina, because LinkedIn is always trying out new stuff. And what I always tell people is if it's not also in the recruiter tool, please don't worry about it. If recruiters can't filter for it, or if recruiters don't care about it, it's way less important than if recruiters have access. So that's a great call out. Chrissy says, how does this help people in human service type of jobs? For example, I'm a counselor by training. So again, as mentioned, Chrissy, I wouldn't sweat it. Now, it is possible that LinkedIn is going to try to get recruiters excited about this kind of qualitative answer. But again, so many of you have been recruiters before. You probably don't want to spend a ton of time reading through a bunch of answers when you're scanning at the speed of light for top candidates. So I would be surprised if this really took off. And then Linda says, are those the same courses that were offered for free during COVID? Yes, Linda. So basically what LinkedIn did is when COVID first struck, they said, hey, we know everyone's stuck at home. Can we give them a chance to use this rare downtime to upskill? And so they offered free courses in all these areas. And then they kept extending it and extending it and extending it. And now instead of extending it for 1 year, they've extended it for the next 5 years, all the way to 2025. Great question. Jessica says, can one choose whether or not to post a score once they receive it? Absolutely, Jessica. So the first thing is you have 2 chances to take the assessment. So even if you're not in the top 30% the first time, you can definitely take it again. And then number 2, you absolutely are under no obligation to share that score. So the only thing that recruiters will ever see is whether you've made it into the top 30% or not. If you failed it 2 times and we're in the bottom 1%, that will not be visible to recruiters. So it's only upside, no downside. Great question. I think Anne asked a similar question. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, great questions there, everyone. All right, time for my next question for you, which is, dun, 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 how many remote jobs would you guess are listed on LinkedIn right now? Is it as few as 50,000, as many as 500,000, or somewhere in the middle? What's your best guess when it comes to this evolving world of remote work? So Stephanie says B, Donna says C, Fran says C, Lynn says C, Dana says C, Anne says D. I love that, Anne, probably even more. And you're all right. The answer is C. It is way up there, even 2.5 years after the pandemic began. And so the reason I call this out is because LinkedIn has been doing so much in the last couple of years to change as the world of work changes. And so I want to show you 2 new job search tools that I think are really powerful. So the first is, let's say you have a student who wants to be a project manager. So you come in here, you type project manager, just the way you always would. But for the first time in the history of job boards, you can now do what we always wished you could do, which is come right over here and say, yeah, there are a lot of on-site roles. That's great. But guess what? There are actually 35,000 jobs just in this one area, just in this one country, that are completely available to folks who want to work flexibly. So if you have anyone who wants to do project management from the beach in Bali, this is their time. There's never been a better time for remote work than right now. That's number 1. Number 2 is, I know you've probably had this experience where you had to console a completely heartbroken student or client who had applied to a job online, didn't hear back, and then saw that job still posted 3 months later. And they're wondering, oh my goodness, they hate me so much, they didn't even bother to respond. Whereas you know the truth. Recruiters are busy. Sometimes they forget to take down job posts. Sometimes they're just really savvy and they're building out a talent pipeline pre-hire to get ready. But whatever the case, that can feel really devastating for your students. So to help them avoid that heartbreak, LinkedIn has this new good housekeeping seal of approval called actively recruiting. Because LinkedIn also knows if there's an actual human being behind the scenes who's coming in, who's checking applications, who's responding to candidates. And it's going to signal that so that your students know where they have a really legit chance versus more of a ghost job opportunity. So if you ever have students who've been burned too many times before, tell them to look for this symbol as a sign of quality. Okay, any questions about remote job searching or actively recruiting? Okay, you're absolutely welcome, Dina. Thank you for that great spirit you're bringing to this webinar. Jessica says, can the recruiter control whether that badge is put on the posting? That is a really good question, Jessica. You have stumped me here. My understanding is that it was only based on activity, but here's the dirty little secret of LinkedIn. Based on LinkedIn's latest 10K from 2017, right before they were acquired by Microsoft, LinkedIn was making 6 times more revenue from recruiters than it was from job seekers. And so it does tend to favor recruiters over job seekers almost every time. And you would think that a recruiter might be interested in having control over that. So let me research that, Jessica, and I'll get right back to you. You have stumped the expert here. Nicely done. Okay, let's move on to our next section. I know it's a little late. I know dinner is calling for many of you, so I'm going to keep on pushing. Okay, based on a recent study, what percentage of hiring managers had said they would rather see a candidate video than another cover letter? Was it about 1/3 of hiring managers, more like half, or more like 2/3? Who would ditch the traditional cover letter in favor of a newfangled video, maybe TikTok style? So Stephanie says C, Abby says B, Lynn says C, Vanessa says B, Fran says C, Donna says C, Kathleen says B. I think everyone is speaking to kind of feeling like cover letters are so old school. And it turns out that hiring managers are right with you. And to respond to that, LinkedIn has introduced something brand new in the last year, which is called the LinkedIn cover story. So not to be confused with the cover photo behind your profile, but the cover story is a chance for your job seekers to record their own little 30-second video right there on their LinkedIn profile. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that many students know about it because it's only available on the LinkedIn app. I know a lot of folks only use the LinkedIn desktop site, but please tell your students this exists because a lot of students and a lot of job seekers probably have really powerful stories to tell. I am so excited to break into educational technology as a former teacher. I would love to make sure that I serve millions of students around the world to help them be successful in their careers. If you can get to that level of crystal clarity about where your clients are headed and why they're motivated to do this work, to me, as a hiring manager myself, and by the way, I lead the marketing team at Khan Academy, so I'm looking at profiles all the time, I would be pretty impressed because now they're speaking my language and they're speaking directly to me. So again, I don't know that everyone has to do this, and certainly there may be folks who feel freaked out about it, and that's totally fine. But for folks who want that extra advantage to really frame up their story for those hiring managers, this could be a great example. And yeah, Chrissy, I will send you an example in the content that I shared afterwards. That is a great call out to really see what this might look like. Fran says, can anyone use the cover story even if they're not looking for a job? Yes, Fran, absolutely. So if you're using this for your own coaching practice and you want to advertise your services and say, hey, this is who I am, this is how I can help you, that could be a powerful use case. I love that, Fran. Love that one. I'd be curious, Linda, you built one of these videos for yourself. Tell us about your thought process. And feel free to unmute, Linda, if you like.
So actually, it was through when I was doing outplacement work, and one of the other outplacement people had a side business helping people do videos. So she was offering this to everyone at the outplacement group to do that. So I do have one. What I found though is that no one clicked on your actual picture. So I put an arrow with a click to see if that would help. But I don't know if anyone really has clicked on it.
Yeah, I hate to say it. This may be one of those good ideas in theory that LinkedIn tests out, and they may not get enough sort of momentum to keep it rolling. Time will tell, but I think your experience probably is pretty similar to many out there, Linda.
I don't think people know it exists or know that people don't know to click there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other thing is that little microphone piece, the 15-second one.
Yeah.
A lot of people use that.
Yeah. And you're talking specifically about like pronouncing your name?
Right.
Yeah, I love that because I think, as the world gets increasingly global and global and global, it's so important that people feel comfortable just, saying hi to someone, whether to a colleague or a potential candidate. So I think recording your name could definitely be a good advantage. And I say that as someone who has a really terrible and hard to pronounce last name. So I totally get it. Okay, awesome. I love that. Everyone, please reach out to Linda. Linda probably has more expertise on this topic than anyone. So she is your go-to person for all things cover story. Okay, let me finish up with one final hack for you all, and then I'm happy to stay on the line and answer any lingering questions. So last thing, based on another recent survey of employers, you can see employers are surveyed quite a bit these days. What percentage of them have planned to move to video interviews permanently, no matter what happens with COVID? Is it as few as 11%, as many as 38%, somewhere in between? So Lynn says B, Donna says C, Kathleen says C, Stephanie says C, Melinda says C, Jessica says C, Andrew Lisa says B, Joni says C. So a lot of C's, some B's. Turns out the answer is B. And of course, what I'm really excited to share with you is this last thing. This is probably my favorite tool of everything I shared with you today, which is the video interview prep tool. And to demo this, I would love one final brave NCDA volunteer to raise their hand or chat in, and I can give you the last copy of this book today, and we can show this off in style. So who's going to help me close it out? It looks like it's going to be Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie, feel free to unmute, turn on your webcam, and let's do this. Hey, Stephanie.
All right, hold on. Let me turn on my video. There we go.
Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you.
And Stephanie, remind me, you've got your own private coaching business. Is that right?
I do, yes.
That's awesome. And you're coming from Charleston?
I am coming from
Okay,
Charleston.
there you go. I
Yep.
finally got it all together. Beautiful. Well, Stephanie, tell me this. Tell me, in your coaching business, what kinds of jobs tend to be really hot right now in terms of what are your clients excited about?
I work mostly with high school students who are trying to graduate college or trying to graduate high school and not quite sure what they want to do. And then young adults trying to figure out what to do with the major they're in because they just went to college for the major. So I do a lot of that. They're really excited about things that are remote, number one, which I find fascinating. And they're very excited about things that involve computers, things like not only cybersecurity, but just analyzing what's out there, material. Those things I think are fascinating because it seems like it's a big, huge career industry, but at the same time, it's so isolating, I feel. Some of them are just not quite sure how to find that balance between being with people and really just sitting behind a computer screen all day.
Yeah, I think you've just called out two mega trends that are clashing right now. So I have a 21-year-old on my team at Khan Academy, and she says, my generation is so depressed right now. Here we were so excited to get onto the workforce, meet people, and we just spent our first couple of years sitting at home in front of our computers, completely bored, completely disconnected. So that's one thing. On the other hand, it's a generation that craves flexibility, right? They've grown up with technology. And so they love the idea of like jetting off to another place, being a digital nomad, having that baked in. I don't know what time will tell, but it'll be interesting to find out. And you and I are on the front lines.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's say that you have could be a high school student who's preparing for a college interview. It could be a college student preparing for an internship interview. Whatever the use case is, I think that this is one of the most undiscovered secrets on LinkedIn, probably because LinkedIn is just so bad at explaining new features, exactly like Linda was saying. But if you come over to this briefcase of all places, the jobs icon, and instead of searching for a job, you come over to interview prep over here on the left-hand side. Again, no one seems to know this exists. You probably all do because you're savvy LinkedIn users, but please, please, please get the secret out there. And what LinkedIn has done is a couple of things that are really powerful. So first of all, it's not only figured out what are the most common interview questions across interviews, it's also broken it down into different categories. So like one job that I think probably a ton of your students would be smart to go into is not just software engineer, but business analyst. Like I think this century is going to be more about data than it is about computing. And if you can master data skills and be really effective, the sky's the limit. So imagine now that you've got this big data interview. You're gonna have to talk about, complex quantitative data, all that good stuff. Well, what I have seen, and tell me if you agree with this, Stephanie, is that students struggle not just with what they say, but also how they say it. Yeah,
for sure.
Especially for high school students, I would imagine.
Oh, yes.
And we all know as coaches and interviewers ourselves, sometimes how you say it is even more important, right? And it creates that famous first impression.
Yeah.
So what I really love about this is even for an introvert myself, even for an antisocial Gen Z 17-year-old, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning. You could come onto LinkedIn and you could record a video the same way that a pro athlete will record their practices, right?
Wow.
Just like a pro athlete would get feedback from their coaches on, hey, here's how you performed, here's how you can improve your swing or your pass technique. LinkedIn's AI is working in the background to analyze not just what you say, but how you say it. And so they're going to get this immediate report based on how quickly they're speaking. Too fast, too slow, kind of that Goldilocks sweet spot. Is there pitch variation or are they monotone? You probably know some folks like that, right, Stephanie?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, every career coach's favorite, right? The filler words, all the things that kind of detract from the professionalism. So I think that's the first step. Any questions about that so far, Stephanie?
Can you go back to the screen previous to this where it was just the general questions before you hit a specific career?
Yeah, for sure. So let me just save that answer for 1 second. And then, I think probably what you'll probably spend most of your time on is just looking at the overall categories, because that will give you a really good sense of like, hey, everyone's going to be asked, tell me about yourself. They're going to ask about strengths and weaknesses. They're going to ask about a time you failed. And all that stuff is all here for your students to practice on.
And that's the best part right now, especially with the student population I work with, is they have no idea how to even answer these basic questions, let alone questions they might have that are skills-based. So these are fantastic to help them. And I've actually written a class and a course that's being taught where kids prepare for their careers. So this would be a great addition for them to be able to get in there and say, let's practice interviewing skills. Let's get you rated. And it's not just the teacher rating them. Now it's LinkedIn rating them. So this is fantastic.
Exactly. I think especially for Gen Z, there is a little bit of that video game dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know what the quantitative elements are. I know how I'm being measured. Let me now focus on changing that. So, you record your video, and then what you're going to do is once you have, the video recorded, not only will you have the AI, but this is kind of really advanced stuff. How cool would it be, Stephanie? Let's say you had, I don't know, a student who was interviewing for a job at Instacart, this hot tech startup in the grocery delivery space. Imagine if they could not just get feedback on their answer from LinkedIn, but they could get feedback from an insider at that company. I know, that's what I thought.
Shut up. That's amazing.
And I don't think that students actually do this because they're so scared in most cases. But for the bravest ones that you work with, say, hey, find the people who went to your same college, maybe even your same high school, and say, guess what? I'm interviewing at Instacart next week. Could you, a fellow alum, just look at my video for 30 seconds? You don't have to talk to me for an hour. Just give me honest feedback on how would I come across in front of your values, in front of your culture. And if there's something that's going to hold you back, it's going to prevent you from being hired, better to know it now than after you get the rejection letter.
For sure.
So
that's
bottom
amazing.
line, what you say, how you say it, that whole enchilada available right here on LinkedIn.
But it also offers the opportunity to connect with somebody who might be in the actual industry they're thinking of going into. And then you have an opportunity for an informational interview about that too. So it's an easy way to get into a connection with somebody without really having to reach out blindly to somebody. So I really like that.
Yeah.
That's what Andrelisa says. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I feel like we're all alumni of our various alma maters here. We probably all do, like calls with students, trying to learn from our experience, and that's great. But a lot of times I feel like I'm just going through the motions, 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there. Tell me about yourself, blah, blah, blah. If I could just give someone 30 seconds of feedback about Khan Academy or Google, I feel like that could be a way more valuable gift than, hey, let's just chat randomly.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's amazing. I
Stephanie,
love this.
You are doing awesome work, not just with college students, but with high school students. The next generation needs your support. So thank you for all that you do, Stephanie.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Cool. I'll be sending you a copy of the book right afterwards.
Woohoo!
And so I want to speak to a couple questions that came in. First of all, Joni had a great question that was seconded by Jessica, which is, typically I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn Premium. I'd rather keep the money in your students' pockets than in mine as a Microsoft shareholder. But there are some places where LinkedIn Premium is beyond just the regular stuff. And that is the ability to get sample answers. So in this case, everything here is free. But if you do want the sample answers to get a sense of what a really good answer looks like, you would have to pay for that. That being said, LinkedIn has no monopoly on this stuff. You can look for that anywhere on the web. Give me a great answer as a data analyst. Give me a great answer as a computer programmer. And so I wouldn't spend 50 or $100 a month just for that. Great question, Joni. Joni says, can you do this on the app or can it be done on your computer? I believe it can be done on the app too, Joni. I will look into that just to confirm. But I think a lot of the video stuff, LinkedIn is pushing towards the app, as with cover stories. So I believe that's the case. Fran says, does someone have to be a first or second connection to assess video interviews, especially for students? Some vetting will be good. Yes. So I want to be really clear about this, Fran. First of all, when I go in here to share my answer, I'm only seeing my first degree connections. So I'm not sharing with random strangers. No recruiter is seeing this. It's all private and it's only shared one at a time with the exact right people who are already in my network. So just to be really clear, the order of operations is before your students even start interviewing, they should be reaching out to insiders, trying to learn about the company, learn about the career, maybe even get a referral, because we all know that's so important. And then once you've built a relationship and you have your answer to share, well, guess what? Now it's easy to reach out to these folks because they're already in your network, they're already vetted, and you know they're trustworthy individuals. So start with just pure networking, and then use this as the final step before the big day. Great question, Fran. Okay, I know we're down to our final 7 minutes. So I want to close out with some bonus goodies for you, and then I want to answer any questions you have on your mind. So if you've got any questions like, Jeremy, what do you think about LinkedIn Premium? Or what should our clients be posting on LinkedIn? Or what do you think about endorsements, Jeremy? Everything is fair game. Happy to give you the honest answer, not just the LinkedIn party line. So feel free to put those questions in the chat or raise your hand if you want to ask live. And as a quick reminder, you have all these goodies at your disposal across every stage of the process, from finding the right path and the right skills, to building those skills, testing those skills, finding great jobs, getting found for those jobs, even getting ready for prime time. And to help you get there, 2 bonus goodies. Number 1, I would love to connect with every single person from tonight's session. Happy to stay in touch, to be your personal LinkedIn insider, get you access to anything you need. Feel free to send me a personalized connection request on LinkedIn, of course. And just be sure to mention the book if that's something you want. I'll get it to you this evening. And then number 2, for those who are representing schools, maybe versus private practice, I do have this offer where if you buy 10 of my LinkedIn books, I will give you free access to my LinkedIn masterclass, something that you can share with all of your students. So I'm going to share that in the chat. And just so you know, I currently partner with about 150 universities around the world. So it's the official LinkedIn training for Stanford MBAs and Harvard Business School and the Canadian Olympic Committee and Teach for America and all these different organizations. Normally, I charge them $1,000 for annual access, but you can get annual access unlimited for all your students, all your alums, all your colleagues, just for buying 10 copies of my book. And that deal is right there in the chat. Okay, that being said, let's take any of those final questions. So Jessica says, actually, my apologies. Let me start with the question from Stephanie. So students will need to make connections after setting up their profile. Can under 16 set up a profile? Oh, Stephanie, if only I could tell you all the stories from my glory days at LinkedIn. When I first got to LinkedIn back in 2012, you had to be 18 or over to use LinkedIn. However, we realized that the savviest students in America, or around the world, frankly, were already thinking about careers at 13, 14, 15. And we didn't want to put up extra friction to stop them. So what we did is we actually worked with our legal team through a very Byzantine process, as you can imagine, and we got that changed to 13 plus. So any student who's 13 or over is now legal to set up a profile on LinkedIn. And there are certain things that are restricted if you're under 18. But again, if you're 13, 14, 15, it's absolutely fair game to come to LinkedIn and start getting that profile developed. Great question. Chrissy says, do you have a LinkedIn for beginners training or any suggestions? So Chrissy, that's exactly what I was just talking about. If you come over to my website, you will see that I have this whole course that I've built out for the last couple of years that is all about using LinkedIn, not necessarily in a super advanced way, but just in the ways that matter most. And again, this is now like sort of the de facto training at the University of Michigan, Kentucky, all these places. And so if you want to get access to it, just follow that link that I shared in the chat. Great question. Okay, let's see here. Jessica says, I'd love to hear you talk about the value of groups today. It seems like engagement has gone way down since 2019, and I'm wondering whether people are finding each other through discussions anymore, or whether recruiters even care about engagement there. Yeah, Jessica, this is my biggest sort of annoyance with LinkedIn, is the stuff that could be most useful doesn't get prioritized if it's also not super profitable. And here's what happened. LinkedIn has had groups, as you know, since well before it went public. I think they came out in like 2007 or 2008. And they were well used for the first couple of years because people love to connect with other people. But as LinkedIn was selling more and more stuff to recruiters, they realized that groups weren't driving revenue the same way that the recruiter product was. And so they basically have allowed it to wither on the vine in the last decade since they went public, because it just wasn't as relevant for Wall Street and shareholders. That being said, I think that the number one way to drive engagement in groups, if you're a group owner, is to actively drive it yourself versus field of dreams style thinking, build it and they will come. So I do lead a very active group on LinkedIn for my Michigan alumni. And the way that I do that is I'm constantly putting stuff out there. I'm tagging people and reminding them to come share their expertise, but it is a lot of work. So what I would say is, if you find that Facebook groups or groups on another platform are more effective, I totally get it, because LinkedIn, unfortunately, has just not invested in this space, to my everlasting sadness. So sorry to report that. Okay, Linda says, are skill endorsements important? Is there a good way to get more? And are recommendations ranked higher? Oh, these are such important questions, Linda. So when I first worked at LinkedIn, that's when endorsements first came out, I think 2013 or so. And it was LinkedIn's first big viral hit. All of a sudden, everyone was endorsing everyone else for everything under the sun. My own mother endorsed me for everything from astronomy to zoology, two topics I know nothing about. And unfortunately, that same mom effect has plagued LinkedIn ever since, which is its data scientists have had a really tough time disentangling really credible endorsements from ones that are just totally bogus. And I know they're making strides there. They're trying to figure out, okay, if someone has a lot of endorsements, they're probably a better endorser, but it's still not credible enough to actually appear in the LinkedIn recruiter tool, again, the source of truth. And so I would encourage your students not to worry about endorsements, but instead to worry much more about recommendations. And here's the fascinating thing about recommendations. If you come into your profile and you see how far down your recommendations are buried, you might say, hey, no recruiter has time to get that far in my profile. Who cares? But if you were to look on LinkedIn Recruiter at my profile in that version, my recommendations would not be at the bottom, they would be at the top. And that's because for a busy recruiter, this is like manna from heaven. Now I don't have to spend hours going through all these candidates. I can see that Jeremy is vouched for. Let me give him a shot. So you don't have to have a million endorsements or a million recommendations, but one or two great recommendations from a boss, from a client is more than enough. Great question. Okay, sorry for missing your question before, Donna. Donna says, could these tools be used or recommended for middle schoolers? Again, as long as they're 13 up, kind of 7th grade, thereabouts, absolutely. In fact, when I worked at LinkedIn, we worked with the Boys and Girls Club of Palo Alto to bring in their students who, in a lot of cases, just like my mentee, Ivan, didn't know a lot of professionals. They didn't have a lot of career role models in their lives. And when we show them, hey, we can find you even alumni from your middle school on LinkedIn sometimes. Imagine what you could do in your life by following these footsteps. You could just see their eyes getting really big. So I would absolutely use LinkedIn, Donna, not to say, hey, here's a boring old tool for your dad or your mom, but here's a tool for you to give you the empowerment you need to go out and do amazing things. Great question, Donna. I love that. And Vanessa says, perhaps they'll get rid of endorsements one day. I do think, Vanessa, that they love the engagement that endorsements drive. I know for a fact, a lot of people only come to LinkedIn to receive endorsements or give endorsements because, again, there's this kind of give and take quality to it. But you're right. I don't think that they've served LinkedIn's recruiters or even the job seekers particularly well because they've created so much confusion. Great call out. Okay, I know we're 1 minute over time. I know a lot of you probably have lasagnas or pot roast in the oven. You're like, Jeremy, I got to get to my stuff. Let me just bring it back to Alicia. Alicia, any closing comments you want to share on behalf of NCDA?
I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Jeremy and also to all of our attendees for your participation and input today. Just another quick reminder, this webinar was recorded. The link will be on the NCDA website, and you can check your NCDA counts next week for CE certificates. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Alicia. You are amazing. Thanks to all of our volunteers. You absolutely rocked it tonight. Here's wishing you a beautiful autumn and many exciting opportunities ahead. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.